This is about wireless lets me do it. Bam!
This is Amy Alkon, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We have been busy working on technical things, but Amy is a champ, and we have worked our way through our problems. And here we are. We're doing the thing. We're doing a show, Amy.
Yeah, you made me laugh so much already. And trying to fix all my problems. So usually I do that for people as an advice columnist and
Yeah.
science-based problem solver. But I appreciate the other way.
The olden times, the advice columnist, that was a good show once a season, right? Like whatever the show was, there'd be the advice columnist show. Has that gone away? I don't think that's in the modern TV show world anymore.
Well, here's the problem. And I had
Hmm.
to end my column after 25 years. It was syndicated. I was in 100 papers. And the papers, they started dying off like old people in a nursing home where there are a lot of diseases. And it's like, then there were 10. And I realized I was financing my column. Like I was paying and not making money because I was paying an editor. I
Right.
mean, it was so crazy. And it's so sad because I love my readers and it's just the thing. So that's why, because there are no newspapers, and we're at the point where people who are, I'm 59, so people who are younger, there are all these things that they don't even know about. What's a video cassette? What's an answering machine?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and newspapers like, oh, I remember those. I've seen my grandpa read one.
Right. And and here comes Bill. The whole idea behind an advice columnist
Hey, how are you?
is I got some echo now with Will.
Hi.
Uh,
I
I'm
like
gonna
this shaped head. It's hot. I like it on this. But we're echoing.
I'm gonna put Will on mute because he's got an echo. But what I was gonna say about the advice columnist thing is it used to be that several people held that job. And now everybody can blather all they want, and so you get advice from everybody in the whole world, and it's not always particularly good or thoughtful, and it tends to be very singular in its direction, and again, not very helpful.
Well, I'll tell you, I started out giving, I'm echoing now. Are you hearing me echo? I hear it in my own ears. That is it bad? And should I stop talking until you fix something, or well, it's
Keep
no, it's
talking.
not
You're
echoing.
good.
Okay.
I'm gonna work on fixing
I
Will.
like how I didn't quite notice that. Okay, so the thing is, I started this out by accident. I'm kind of a prankster, and I was living in New York City, and with two friends, we decided to give free advice on a street corner in Manhattan as a joke. Now I made a sign because no one makes it as badly as I do. Free advice. The advice ladies present free advice from a panel of experts, and we had all these things like nail biting directions. I mean, I hadn't even taken psychology in college, but then people started asking us serious questions, and I thought, oh my God, this is so irresponsible. I don't know anything. And so I am just a nerd, and I read through all of psychology, and I was horrified. Oh my God, Freud, he just made stuff up. It's really appalling. And I discovered Albert Ellis, who started what's called rational emotive behavior therapy, which is one of the two brands of cognitive therapy. His is, I think, the best, which is basically using rational thinking to solve your emotional problems, that you're disturbed because you're thinking rationally. And he was very influenced by Epictetus, one of the Stoics, who said, it is not events that disturb us, but the views we take of them. And so I started, so the rest of the story is someone wrote a story about us in the New York Times, got cut down, the photo got taken away. But I'm an enterprising person. And so I ran with that, and I used it to get us a deal with De Niro, a newspaper column, a book deal. One of my partners, it turned out, well, our partnership collapsed, but we still had the Daily News column. They didn't want to write it. I wrote it, and then I syndicated it to other papers. And over the years, I got increasingly science-based. Oh, and Albert Ellis, actually, I met him, and it turned out he was a fan of my column, which was one of the two great reviews in my life. I've gotten the other is David Zucker, who did Airplane, telling me I'm funny. It's just like, thank you. And so I've always been very offended by, other than the two biddies, and I met Ann Lander, she's wonderful. I met her briefly, but, they're just like sort of like grandma giving advice, and you knew that. But all these other people who rose up, I just thought, how dare you? How dare you just start pulling it out of your ass? Because so much of what we think, is our intuition is wrong. Look at the science, and it tells you something different. And also, it's for about since about 1998, I have increasingly put an evolutionary foundation into my column. And that's, we live in this modern world, but we still have ancestral era antique psychology driving us that's often mismatched. And that can help us understand our behavior and also not, for example, demonize men. I mean, there's so much that would be solved that, men like to look. Well, yes, because if they didn't, the planet would be populated by cockroaches and not people. And so, hi again, Will.
Hey, glad to be back.
We're glad you're back. And I think that's really important. I really am just offended. There are all these people giving advice, and I'll see stuff they say and think, well, no, that's not true.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Will. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got the echo part fixed. We're aces today, man. It's Friday. We're doing great. That whole
Can I say a thing that people consider sexist and horrible? Well, you remind me of the guy in my extreme nerd meetup group that I call Hot Bald Guy.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
That's really my life goal. Being bald, they say, is actually a sign of being very manly, like high T levels. You probably played sports. I may just be using this defensively, but
right.
I mean, I've had the same haircut since I was 18, and it's a very simple one.
Oh, really? But see, to me, it looks like a man is very comfortable with himself, that he's not doing the thing where it's like, he takes like the 3 strands of hair, paste them across my head. And it's that, the being comfortable with yourself that's hot.
Well, yeah.
Nice shaped head.
I feel the same way about you. As read the first part, I'm not really like looking at your head shape or whatever. But I'm actually not naturally bald. I mean, in high school, I had kind of long plaited hair, and I dyed each strand of it different colors. And I did things like put little golden bones in it. And the point of it was just to be kind of provocative. Like Caucasian girlfriends loved it at the time. My mom and their dads hated it. But eventually, when I started applying for jobs and so on, that wasn't really all that much of a plus. So I just shifted to what at that time in Chicago was kind of the Michael Jordan bald head. Like a lot of guys would just shave their heads, and it takes 30 seconds once you get used to it. So I've kept it ever since.
See, one thing I love about you from all your tweets and stuff I read is your realism, and that's some of it where there's a current thing where people they'll say, well, they should just accept that I have, like, what was the Medusa who had the snakes and lizards coming out of her head? Not that that's what you're describing, but this is a sort of spoiled brattism that I see now. When I was hiring editors, I would hire younger editors and mentor them. Oh my God, I live to not hire anyone in their 20s. And sorry, people in their 20s who are not this kind of like soggy diaper type person. But I had much better luck hiring people who were starting over instead of starting out in their 30s and 40s who didn't have that, sort of thinking.
Yeah, well, they're two different things. I mean, I think one aspect of this is like the extreme spoiled nature of a lot of young people. Like you were the only kid. This is true in most world powers, like the USA and China. So you were the recipient of kind of all that love, and like you never got your ass beaten. You never even got yelled at. You were never told that you were underperforming your brother. So you assume that the world should adjust to you. If you weigh, I mean, there's a plus size influencer, quote unquote, who recently went on this really viral rant about how hotels should adjust the size of their hallways and so on so her body would fit. So I think there's that. And I also think that combines with kind of the modern left rebellion against human nature. So you see these crazy debates online, like, should women want rich men, or is that immoral? Like, should men want attractive, kinky women, or is that power dynamic wicked? And for me, this is just a bunch of bullshit. Like, it's a bunch of hamsters yapping about nothing. But I mean, these are real.
We're allowed to say shit. Good. Okay. I didn't know we were allowed to. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, but so the question of whether or not to take this seriously is pretty interesting. I mean, I don't at all, and it doesn't seem like
seriously.
To take the idea of many modern people that the self should be kind of the definer of society, which you see everywhere. Like traditionally, I think the idea was that when you encountered the world, you would find aspects of everything from business to marriage that you didn't much like, but that you'd have to accommodate to. And I think that the attitude today is more that when you encounter those things, they should be changed to benefit you. And this has real impacts, like even during serious things, like under COVID-19, the constant mantra was just one life, right? Like we'll lock everyone down, we'll cancel every high school dance, we'll ruin every small business because 5 82-year-olds might be saved. And I think that a
Right.
traditional generation of leaders would have just said, no, I mean, it sounds terrible, but people die. You can't stop the progression of the world for a very small number of people. And I tend to incline more toward that mental path.
You know, you make a good point. We used to have adults in charge who would just say, no, you're ridiculous. Go away. And it is this narcissism. I was going to say the me generation. And it's really amazing. And, you know, this idea that everything should be reshaped for you, for your comfort. And that if you're not comfortable, it's some kind of social crime. Oh my God, I spent so much of my life being uncomfortable. And it motivated me to change or to make things better, to realize, you know, I needed to act with more self-respect. You know, that's my book that I wrote, the ckology book, you know, where I didn't have friends until I was 15. And then I moved to New York. And when you're like that and you get friends, you cling to them like a rat on driftwood. And I was a suck up. And I thought, other people don't get walked on like I do. And I looked at them and I thought, wow, I wonder if I behave with self-respect, like basically if I imitate my boss and these other people I saw, you know, if maybe I would get treated differently. So I did that repeatedly and I was scared because I was this, you know, suck up who didn't want to not be liked. But, you know, nobody chased me out of the cafe with a broom when I said, I'm sorry, but my whatever is something or other. And I'm not that big of, you know, someone micromanager. I'd like 2.5 ice cubes, please, in my water. But, you know, and that's the thing. And not having that narcissistic attitude, you know, allows you to become more of a person, I think.
I tend to agree. Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to have a question here. I actually do have some. I mean, Pete invited me to do this show a while back. And so I read some of the Advice Goddess columns and so on. Generally full of solid tips for people. I guess in terms of that, like, well, the first question is, what do you have to do to be an advisor? Well, that actually is a worthwhile question. What do you have to do to become an advisor or a life coach, an influencer of people? Like, do you think
what now? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, like, do you think that there should be some kind of baseline credentials there? Or is it just you seem to be doing well and people come to you and listen to what you have to say?
Well, I'm not for government intervention in things. Generally, I'm a libertarian, and you know, and so that means there'll be some level of, you know, I mean, real con artists. I see all the time people that others respect, and you know, and I'm writing 2 horrible medical books right now. Not medical for, you know, the medical industry, but for people to understand 2 areas of our medical care that are not evidence-based, and to understand what the evidence is so they can ask for evidence-based care. And so, you know, I don't have any kind of credentials to do that, but that's precisely why I'm the person to do this. My credentials are that I've been schooled informally by an epidemiologist since like 2009, who's yelled at me and scolded me and taught me about how to vet research. And then I'm transdisciplinary. A lot of professors aren't. They have to narrowcast, most professors. That's why I didn't get a PhD. Albert Ellis actually advised me not to do it. Greatest advice I've gotten. And but I sit here, my desk is it's a sea of scientific papers right now, you know, and I'm so nervous about giving advice that's not based in good evidence. And then I see these people, they just say stuff, or they read. You can't just read one study. You have to read a body of work and know the researchers behind it. There's so much. And, you know, in newspapers, you know, people who report on science, they maybe moved over from reporting on the Kardashians yesterday. They're not trained like they used to be. And then I'm also very different in that, obviously, I've fucked in 2 book titles. Someone criticized me on Twitter for, you know, I can't remember saying shit ton or something like that. Like, you know, it's like, you're going to be really unhappy with my book titles here. The first one, the one before this was Good Manners for Nice People, will sometimes say fuck. The fuck thing is just an accident, keeps happening. But anyway, you know, where like that there's just such a lack of any kind of founding, and people don't know that. And people get followings because they market themselves well. And the truth is, I just don't care enough about that. And like vis-a-vis, like reading all the, here's how I read scientific paper. This is me reading a scientific paper. I'm really serious and terrified that I'll get it wrong. And so you just don't see that in other people. And so that's, I think, why there's so many basically charlatans out there, including the people, oh, they have a PhD and they're respected. Yeah, really? You know, I don't respect them.
That's a great
So
point. The transdisciplinary thing. I don't know if you guys know Judith Rich Harris's work, but she
I
wrote the
do. I love her. Yeah.
yeah, she wrote the nature assumption or the nurture assumption, and she destroyed that whole branch. Matter of fact, the guy that kicked her out of Harvard, she won the award with his name on it afterwards. And
That's so awesome.
That's funny.
yeah,
That's so
it's so
awesome.
great.
That's so great. Well, C.S. Pinker is a supporter. So that's the thing. I don't think I don't have some kind of like science daddy who's gone like, hey, look at her. You know, you know, I'm not saying, oh, is this my work equivalent to hers? I write on different things. When you're not pigeonholable, when you don't write on one subject, you're a little bit harder to follow. You know, but she's an example, and there are others. There's a woman named Vera Wild, who I've become friends with. We respect the same guy, the same epidemiologist. We both learned from him, and she's so good. She's so good, and you know, but I don't think that a lot of people they're just likes on things.
Yeah.
They just they don't care enough to do the real investigation. That takes, by the way, longer time than you get money for, like by far.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. I'm a moron financially, and you know, I wish I were a gold digger because it would have worked out really well. I was always like, oh, you know, I don't need to get married or anything. I'm like, couldn't I have been some rapacious woman, like finding a billionaire? I mean, I dated guys who were really wealthy. I just didn't care. So.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, you really would have to go for the first husband, you know, take half, and then you're permanently secured. You can do whatever you want.
That's so gross. And you know what? I'm so opposed to that. In New York, with one of my advice lady partners, you know, we didn't have money, and so we had this idea to put an ad in New York Press, which was a wonderful paper, and it was in the classifieds, which was amusing dinner companions available. Two beautiful, creative women, you know, will exchange dinner for witty conversation. You buy dinner, we provide the rest. So we didn't want to, you know, take anybody for a ride. We were really clear on, look, we're not going to pay. We'll just talk, and then we're going to leave. And so, and it allowed people to make a choice instead of, I'm not a scam artist. And so, by the way, I want to point out, because I think you guys like this, note my plastic straw.
breaking all kinds of rules here.
Living on the edge. Yeah.
Totally.
What fixes that plastic straw is putting it in a plastic bag and then having some man take it and dump it in his truck and then put it in the dirt. I wanted to. There's a thing that you can do, and this is crazy. People don't believe this, but even as a layperson, you can read Supreme Court decisions, you know, and you can inform yourself. You can go on to, for a small amount of money, go on to JSTOR and read basically any academic paper ever written, or Google Scholar, and you can become comparably educated to a lot of people by just simply getting into the literature. I mean, that's the first thing you have to write a paper, right? Is to have a lit review. And if you've done the lit review, guess who your peers are? The people who've also done the same work, right? It doesn't make you a PhD, but it does make you something more than a layperson.
There's actually
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, there's actually a pretty important question that I would ask both of you guys here, which is, do you think there's any inherent value to expertise? Because, I mean, as opposed to, like, what you guys are describing is basically just IQ. Like, I think either of you
I don't think it's that.
Well, I
don't think it's that.
Like, I think I could sit down and read most academic papers and have a pretty coherent idea of whether I thought what I was reading was brilliant and interesting or just bullshit. And I've actually looked at the writing in entire fields like Black and women's studies and just thought, well, most of this just seems to be crap. Like, you begin with the conclusion that communism is good or whatever, and you just work backward from there. Or you argue that everything that exists in society that you view as negative is due to, like, your demon force, like the patriarchy or whatever. But I guess the question that I'm asking is, like, do you guys think that there's an inherent value to being trained in something that's not really technical, like psychology? Or could most intelligent people have pretty much the same level of insight on that? And I strongly think B. Like, I think intelligence and aggression would be a much better predictor of how useful your commentary or your advice would be than actually, like, having a degree in sociology.
Okay, I want to divide. There's a division here.
Okay.
Psychology research, I mean, some of it's really terribly written, but yeah, if you're smart and you get enough of a background, because the background part is important. You know, when you go through a paper, I know the previous research and the researchers and everything, but the difference is in medical research that I'm reading now, and expertise actually can really, really work against you. If you've gone to med school, you know, or, you know, you're unidisciplinary, you've been trained in that discipline, you accept things in that discipline. They're just accepted facts. You don't challenge them. When I started this book, I call it Book Monster 1 because it grew into 2. I'm really very stupid. I'm a stupid, smart person. You know, that I approached this like a naked, ignorant baby, which I kind of was. I had to learn endocrinology. I had an endocrinology textbook pasted all over my shower, my bedroom walls, you know, and so what I didn't have was what I call the fossilized beliefs of people in the field. There are things, we believe this because we believe this, and this is what we believe in our field for a long time. Well, that's not an okay reason to believe something. And let's look back and see where that came from. Oh, wait a second. You know, and then there are misconceptions. There's a big misconception in this stuff. I'm sorry, I can't say what the subject is, but where there's an error that's been passed on. It's like a toxic game of telephone. This famous researcher put the error in her paper and other people put it in theirs. And then people just quote that. They quote her paper. And so they're getting the whole subject wrong because they don't look at her footnotes and go, wait, but that's not what you're talking about. That's not it at all. And I do that because, you know, I'm terrified and a newbie and all of this. And so that's an area where, you know, not being an expert allows you to have objectivity you wouldn't if you were an expert in the field.
That's actually a really useful and interesting answer. I mean, I think this is true of pretty much every field. Like, I'm not, Pete, I think has a question, so I'll say this really briefly, but like I was debating religion on Twitter and all those platforms the other day, and we got into kind of the question of theodicy, like, why is there evil? And I said, well, the most obvious explanation is that there's no God or God is evil. And this is correct. Like, there's no way around it.
Wait, can you repeat that? I missed that.
The most obvious explanation for why, you know, the gods allow evil is that there aren't any gods, or some of them are evil. I mean, like, it's what are the limits of the box? Like, if you are a Christian and your starting point is, I believe I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb and so on, you cannot accept that your God might not exist or might be bad, might be on the other side of that, you know, heavenly dispute, because that would mean you're not a Christian. If you are, however, not a Christian, I mean, if anything, my patroness would be Athena, but I mean, like, or Coyote or whatever. But I mean, like, if you're not, you can just say, well, the one obvious explanation is that your religion is wrong. And the same thing I find is very often true when you go into the more technical social sciences. Like the Ibram Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, et cetera, explanation for any gap. I mean, I see you guys think these people are as silly as I do, but the explanation for any gap in, say, IQ between different groups would be racism. Even if we can't find it, it's out there somewhere, it's in the system. Two other explanations would be some groups like Asians and maybe West Africans are just smarter, one, or two, this is what I believe, there are obvious cultural differences, like how much people study. If you can't say the other two things, one of which is obviously accurate, that's the debate, then you're stuck with stupid explanation number 3. And there are a lot of stupid explanation number 3 fields. I just don't know how prevalent that is in medicine.
See, what I really like about you and respect is that you're open to, well, okay, like, let me just look at the whole sphere, and you don't have what I call, you know, secular religious takes where it's just like, you can't think that, you can't say that. What was your question about medicine? I have like a memory, like a tea strainer.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, so first of all, thanks for the compliment. I think that is actually true. And part of that is just a background, like how I grew up. I mean, my mom herself was from like an upper class family, the Chicago Wards, but she, from a very early age for me at least, was an inner city school teacher. And I basically grew up where she taught. So I lived in like Chicago for many years, which was a lot of fun in the 90s. Like I moved to East Aurora, which is like a working class, like inner suburb of Chicago, so on. And I was just like, I was very intelligent, but I mean, I learned for the first 18 or so years of my life by buying books from the thrift shop and like sitting on my skateboard reading them. And it struck me that some things that people thought in the class that I was casually interested in joining were real. Like there was useful stuff that I learned about manners and art and so on down the line. But a lot of them just seem to be stupid prey bullshit to me, which is something I still think. So yeah, I think my goal as a writer would be, and I think yours is, to try to find out what reality is. And there seems to be a lot of open denial of reality at the basic level of people like sex and money. Like they're things that you're not supposed to say. They're just obviously correct.
Right. Yeah.
That has always been bizarre to me. My question about medicine was really just a sideline, like how good is medical research? But I think we've kind of covered it. It's up to you if you want to
I
speak on
can't
that
even tell you how terrible, so much of it is. And the practice standards. So doctors don't read research. They usually aren't trained to read research. They're not trained in diagnostic reasoning. And the problem is, David Sackett, the father of evidence-based medicine, said 50% of what you learn in med school is wrong. And this is a long time ago. The problem is you don't know which 50%. Well, okay, so they graduate and half of what they learned is outdated and wrong, and they don't read a thing. And so people, they'll say to you, oh, doctors are sociopaths. They're just in it for the money. I go to Kaiser. I have a male gynecologist. He's a nice man. He just wants to deliver babies. He's like a lady whisperer. He can tell like what you're feeling and everything. He's like, want to see ultrasound? I was like, yeah. Wow, bowel. That's like the 405 freeway. Sorry, that might be too much information. But so he's not some greedy sociopath. But what he goes by are practice standards that tell him, here's what you prescribe. And because they're not able to read the research, and nobody's vetting the practice standards, unless you're a weirdo like me who takes this stupid book on, and so that's the real problem, that the research is flawed. Nobody figures it out, and there are a few people who will figure it out, but then they're sort of ostracized and you don't get funding. So this is what happens in medicine. If you're not studying something that's already believed, it's hard to get funding. And also, and I'm a libertarian, pro-business. I'm not some, I hate pharmaceutical companies. I take pharmaceuticals. I'm grateful for them. But, the pharmaceutical companies will fund certain kinds of research. And if your research is going to find something or does find something that you're not going to sell their drug, well, you're not going to be funded. And these big medical societies, they are funded by the pharmaceutical companies like the American Heart Association. Look at the list of like the people killing Americans, like companies with processed food, and so, this is the problem, that there's too much, there are perverse incentives everywhere.
True.
Just this week, the ALS community had this big meeting trying to get this experimental drug out of like the stuck mode and going forward. And because ALS is so insidious and the way it moves faster than science. And so all of this, the reasonable normal methods of trying to like plod along and go through, that doesn't work for ALS because you're dead within 3 years for the most part.
Okay.
Well, all of these scientists looked at all the people of ALS who all showed up and were all speaking out and activating on Twitter. And they said, hey, fuck you. It's too dangerous. We're not going to let you do it. And they're like, our community is now destroyed. Thanks. Now we're all going to go. And they all just backed away from Twitter because now they have to go recover it because a bunch of people who know science can't listen to the people who are like, what you're saying doesn't matter, right? The speed of your science is slower than the speed of our disease, our affliction.
Well, see, I have to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and so because of their inability to adapt, we're basically in the exact same spot for all intents and purposes as we were when Lou Gehrig was diagnosed in the early 1930s. This is our mid 1930s. So the same spot, right? Because we haven't been able to advance. And here we are, we have science, we have all this technology, and we had a chance to inch forward possibly at what really is minimal risk, but the science community and the businesses, they can't handle it.
See, I just realized this is one of those cases where, Amy, shut up because you don't know about this drug and the situation. I just had all these things come to mind, like there's something called publication bias, where research is held back if it finds that it kills you or doesn't work as they say. And so because I don't know this is I told you about this when I used to be on this public radio show all the time, and they stopped having me because they asked me about global warming, and I said, "Oh, I don't have an opinion on that because I'm not a climatologist, and that's complicated. I don't have a physics background, so I basically don't have anything of value." And don't you think, like, the polar bears, like, I don't know, I don't comment on that. Ask me about anthropology, or I'll tell you, I'll give you an answer. And so that's one of these cases. That's why I'm shutting up. But I do want to say, that there's a case to be made for letting people have, they're dying. They're going to die like very soon, have that drug. And then, but also it's like, well, what's the reality of this research and this drug? So since I don't know, I said that in a very long way.
And the problem is it's not typical in terms of the results, right? And it's one of those things where the findings, when they're positive, are small, so small that it's like, oh, that's not scientifically valid. And what the community is saying, and I'm not speaking for the community here, but they're saying, yes, but for those 5% of people, that might be their answer, because the disease is so unique each time it happens. You really need your own, you need your Amy solution, your Pete solution, and your Will solution. And again, the for as great and as positive as all the medical advancements we have been, the community moves in a certain way, and now they're being challenged to be better. And well, this past week they weren't.
Okay,
fair enough.
Yeah, no,
I wanted to go back to your point, Will, about expertise. If you guys don't mind me changing this topic a little bit. One of the things that is higher up on the echelon of order now of expertise is some level of notoriety. You can be the world's expert on something, and if you're in the field in, I don't know, Saqqara in Egypt, or you are the world expert, like Judith, and you're bedridden, and you don't get to go out and speak, you don't exist. And so you can be the expert, but if you don't have a voice, you're not an expert. And so some person can establish a following on X or whatever it's going to be, and they can become the expert. And literally, you can be blasted into oblivion because you don't even exist. That's another problem with expertise, is the ability to get 600,000 people to follow you on a platform, and you don't have the credentials to that someone else in your field has. You don't even know that they exist. You can't cite their work.
Yeah, the distinction between like actual brilliance, I don't really care about expertise one way or another, but actual brilliance and notoriety is a pretty big one. I mean, like, I'm actually a good political scientist. Like, I mean, myself and Bob Moranto published a pretty major paper this year. He was actually the lead author, and then I've written 4 books. But like, I'm not the best political scientist in the game. I mean, there are a bunch of wonky guys that are every day calculating our exact risks of down road nuclear war and that kind of thing. But I think a lot of people that are in that zone really don't have any interest in being famous or notorious at all. So yeah, a lot of the people that have truly large platforms in any particular field, I'm thinking of Jason Stanley, who I have no particular beef with, but the guy known for Twitter debates where he yells, "I wrote the book." I mean, a lot of those people are not necessarily the top person in their field. They're the person who's slightly above average and who's good at talking to other people. I mean, like, popularity, the great high school talent, is just being good with people. And that's a skill just like anything else. So, like, there aren't that many people that are good with Beatles and good with people. So it's actually important. If you're going to be a leader who's pretty good and who has a public profile, it's important to consult with other people and see, like, what knowledge you can pull up into you. I mean, that's absolutely key. And I assume, Pete, that's true in the military as well. I know that's true in business as well. Yeah. Like the flashy 6'2" CEO, you're never going to let him survive in like a trading floor environment if he's a moron, or she. But like, often that's not the best, highest selling person. It's the person with the best hairdo that can close certain kind of deals. So that's something to keep in mind. One final thing before we kind of swing back in terms of the questions. One thing that I do, coming from a business background, when it comes to things I don't know much about, is just track the market. Like, I'm actually not that worried about climate change at all. I mean, I think there are things you can look at, like the price of beachfront realty, insurance costs in Florida and South Carolina. I mean, like, it sounds funny and everyone makes fun of Bush and Obama when you bring this up. But like, if the smartest people in the world really thought the motherfucking world was ending, excuse me, but like that we're all going to die, like, they wouldn't, like, real estate in Oahu, like all those places you want to live. I mean, I'm doing okay. Like, you look at the pricing, that's not going down. There aren't people fleeing inland. So, I mean, there are ways to predict that. What you do see happening as a sort of an investment tip here is that stock in companies that do things like make seawalls, seed clouds, even make paint, because we're going to have to do something about our roofs and like the lack of green space in cities. That stuff is going up dramatically. Like that's worth buying into. So what's actually going to happen is that we're going to adjust our behavior like 5%, we're all going to live. And this has happened over and over. I mean, Club of Rome, population bomb. There were these doomsday predictions. I mean, I remember not dating for 5 or 6 months in high school because I read Coming of Heterosexual AIDS? That book where the guy was like, everyone's going to die, avoid mosquitoes, only sleep with one woman your entire life. And, it didn't last long, but every one of those predictions has been wrong. Like the hammer and the dance COVID models from that guy, Pueo, who's a cool guy if you've ever been in like any kind of financial discussion with him. But like he said 20 million people were going to die and the market panicked and all these people were freaking out. He was on CNN for 3 days running. That proved to be completely false. Like in that year, we lost 300,000 people. RIP, that's a tragedy. But he was off by 2 orders of magnitude. I think that's generally what you see. And like looking at the financial markets or anything like that is a good way of actually keeping track of that. There wasn't really a question attached to that. It's just like, I think we know that we're not going to blot ourselves out of existence. Kind of last sentence, but my real worry with climate change actually is that we're going to do COVID again, where it's going to be like just one Somali life can't be lost. The deserts are going to be hard hit by this. We've got to stop driving cars so our enemies don't die.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that is something I have no personal interest in doing with all love for those people. But I think that's going to be very strongly endorsed by like the Klaus Schwabs of the world. How can we, woe is me, so on.
Well, my big problem with all these people who are climate activists is that, if you actually care about the climate, you advocate for nuclear power plants. It's
Absolutely.
the answer. The waste from those, someone just did some estimation that it, like for 50 years that it might fill one football field, or maybe wouldn't even. And, and here they are, really so much of it, my idea is that so much of it is about being these tiny little authoritarians, like hippie authoritarians, who want everyone to go without modern conveniences. You have a car. I had all these people on Twitter go after me because they were saying, people from Amsterdam and everything were saying that you should have, it's because I said something, let me just correct, that I said that if you're like a parent riding a bike next to traffic on Venice Boulevard, you're an asshole. Like if you're a tech bro, whatever, no children, well, like you're an adult, do what you want. But to do that, to imperil your child that way, and all these people were like, told me I should die and be run over, whatever. And that also that we should all be biking in Los Angeles. Now they're saying this from the Netherlands. Okay. So we have this huge metropolitan area, bigger than the state of New Jersey. And my neighbors work on movie sets in the valleys, their crew. So they have trucks and things. And so wait a second. So they have 5 a.m. calls. So wait, they should bike over the Santa Monica Mountains, like a little wagon behind them. They'll carry all their stuff at 2 a.m. and like really, and then get hit by a, do we still have buses? I don't know. Like it's ridiculous. And it's
and let me just take that. You can take everybody in LA and put them on a fucking bike, right? And that would make a shit of difference. This gets me so riled up. I'm so sorry, but
I love it.
You live in LA too, right?
Yeah, I live in Orange County, but it's all one big blob, right? If you want to see what is bad for the environment, go to Ukraine and understand. Like, if they really cared about the environment, you know what it costs to put, a ton of concrete 40 feet in the air where that building used to be? More than I can ever do in my life. Like, it's so, tanks. An Abrams tank has to run 24/7. It just does. That's just how it is. And it chews up the earth and all of the like there's nothing comparable to war in terms of damaging the environment, right? It's just, and so we must save Ukraine. Okay, great. But, at the cost of the environment or like, so it's all just a bunch of nothing. Me riding a bike from here to your house, sure, it's 35 miles. And if I was hyper fit, maybe I could do that. It would take me 4 hours and I would need a shower and a masseuse afterwards. But hey, great. And then I got to go back. Okay. But that's not reality. That's not reality, right? Like we have to find ways to be a good steward, right? I'll paint my roof, all that stuff. But
Yeah, actual degrowth would be genocidal. I mean, it would kill tens of millions of people. Like, I mean, humankind spent almost all of our species' history trying to get away from subsistence farming, like
Right.
from the stuff that people want us to do, from like being trad wives chained to stoves where your husband's like out in the pasture breaking clods with his hoe. I mean, like that sort of stuff that people on both the left and the extreme right fantasize about, by the way, like return spelled with a V and all that type of stuff, is exactly what mankind has spent almost all of time trying to avoid. I'm kind of just reiterating this, but like LA is bigger than Chicago, which I think only 8 cities in the world are, 12, something like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the Chicago Metro is 12 million people. LA is a 16. If you had 16 million people riding bikes and pushing jitney carts, you just have Bombay. I mean, like I've been to some of
Yeah,
these cities, like
you're
Ciudad de
right.
Mexico. Like it's the worst imaginable situation. Like there are animals and sometimes people like crapping by the side of the road because traffic
Right.
moves so slowly. And I'm not just mocking those two great powers. It's that's what happens. Like you can't drive to the bathroom. So I think there's a real again kind of pseudo moral, pseudo religious undertone to all this stuff. Like if you talk to the hard enviro movement, and I dated one of these people in law school, which is interesting for both of us as a study in contrast, but definitely gave me some exposure to this ideology I think is insane. The real issue is like the old Whole Earth catalog, Monkey Wrench Gang. It's the idea that human civilization is bad and it should be opposed. We should reduce our population, which I think is being intentionally done right now, by the way. Young people can't figure out how to have sex, and there's all this god-awful advice out in public. But that is an ideology separate from each individual element of climate strategy. So, I mean, when I've mentioned some of this stuff, like, for example, the new light gray spackle paint that came out of, I think, Purdue, if you put it on your roof, would make your house climate neutral, people get angry and they say, well, that's not all of the goal. There are other things we want to do. And it's like, yeah, I mean, make everyone a childless communist, but that has nothing to do with whether my personal goal of cooling the planet down a little bit. Like just I mean, Pete and I both have kind of a bro audience. Like if you really, especially as a guy, want to do something about climate change, plant 7 trees. Like that offsets your climate output for the year. Like all this has been published many times before, but if you tell it to hippies, they just don't want to hear it because the real goal is like, no unshaven white people or something. So that's the problem.
Control, authoritarian control. And yeah, and I'm 59, so I'm wearing an evening dress now, and I wear this as day wear everywhere, to the drugstore, to pick up my prescription, and I am not riding a goddamn bike.
Yeah.
And people think about like a mom with her kids and grandma in a minivan. What's she gonna do? Like she's gonna have one of those like 10-seater bikes. I mean, it's crazy. We have modern conveniences. If you want to live the hippie lifestyle, I'm not. No, not doing that. And these things of like paint your roof, these are meaningful solutions. They don't want that because you know what? Then they have nothing to complain about. They have nothing to cry about if there isn't this sort of, oh my God, the Cassandra, the Paul Air, like the world will end, in 28 days. And it's like, I'm still here. Yeah. And I want my refrigerator and the air conditioning and to get around in motor vehicles. And could I please have a flying car? I mean, go away. You want to live in a tent and, shit in the backyard in a hole. How about it? Not me.
I don't think a lot of people, like we've both talked publicly about like dating and this sort of thing. I don't think a lot of people fully understand everything that would mean. Like deodorant and shaving your body hair. And this is true for men too. These things just started in the past 50 years. And I don't want to return, to the older standard there. So no, we don't need to, everyone doesn't need to be riding bikes for 8 hours a day before like cooking their 4-course starch-based meal. And, this idea, I think that people like to feel that they live in a time of apocalyptic meaning, to steal a line from the leftist writer Hockey Mod Booty. And this isn't just on the left, which I shit on all the time. It's also on at least half of the right. Like the other day, I just posted some basic growth stat to Twitter, and it's like, okay, I'm on the right when it comes to business and all this, but let's shut up about this, boys. Like in terms of income, tech, women's and minority rights, although I probably shouldn't have led with that one for this audience, but just a bunch of other things. Like the world's gotten better for the past 300 years. And people just refused to believe this. Like they were saying the statistics were made up or that things were better in the 1950s because there was less racial conflict and all of this, which is an odd position.
Oh,
But like
no, really?
all of this kind of stuff,
Insane.
like you want to believe that right now you live in the most challenging time ever. So these little fights that you're doing, like gluing your hand to the glass frame of a painting, have real meaning, but they don't. They're just irrelevant, time wasting nonsense for the grown-ups in the room.
Yeah, no, you're so right on all of this. You know, these people doing this stuff, it's really about, it's narcissistic. You know, here I am, I've glued my hand to the painting, rip their skin off, pull them off, you know, Van Gogh, hi, we want, you know, we don't care about you. Just, you know, I mean, it's just so ridiculous, the stuff that they're going through. And the sex thing, by the way, a lot of this has to do with this pernicious stuff put out. I like gross. But I'm really for just the science-based view of men being told not to be men, not to have any kind of sort of sexual aggression. And I don't mean like, you know, you rape like the lady in the grocery store, but like if I'm on a date with someone and they say, you know, and it's going, you know, sort of well, and we're kind of, you know, into each other. Oh my God, don't ask if you can kiss me. Just kiss me. Ask. It's like the least sexy thing. Or now, and I'm 59, I've seen this thing now where men are not sexually aggressive at all. And yeah. I'm not, let's say, not a prude. So I've had sex before the first date. You know, where you go out with them and it's like, okay, well, you know, and I flirt and everything and nothing happens. And I think reasonably men are afraid because there's all this expectation, women are supposed to be men's equals, but that because women are higher in a trait called agreeableness, you know, they're less likely, that's a sort of a pleaser personality trait, you know, and it's harder for them to say no. Well, that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn to say no. And a guy's not responsible for deciding maybe she doesn't really mean yes. You know, and believe me, as a person who was like a complete doormat for a number of years, you know, you go, oh, I'm a doormat. That's kind of not working for me and bad things happen. Okay, now I'm going to stand up for myself. You know, so that girl, Aziz Ansari thing, that was like such a like awful thing done to him because he didn't rape the girl. There was a door. She could have left. She didn't. Okay, so I understand why women don't because I've been that woman. But you know what? Then you go like, that wouldn't work out so well. I think next time I'm gonna like, you know, grow a pair. Sorry to use the male analogy, but you know, and I'm gonna say no. I'm leaving. I'm not into this or whatever. You know, live and learn. But you don't like now this thing of like publicly shaming everyone, you know, for not doing anything wrong, and then they have to like recover that from their career. It's really terrible.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, because I don't know if Pete had a comment too. But
no, go ahead.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, to me, the test of something when you're talking about philosophies and all that is whether or not they work. So a lot of stuff that I see that comes out of college and kind of the inexperienced upper middle class, and this goes back to Marxism, and I'm just going to rant about the same thing for the entire interview. But like a lot of this stuff, like fourth wave feminism is another example. Like people have these ideas, like men and women are exactly equal and almost entirely the same. And certain things that don't involve recognizing this are thus wrong or evil, especially if there's a difference in quote unquote power dynamics. So, and I think that this is where and by the way, I'm not going to totally blame women here. There are a bunch of things guys are doing, like the lack of basic athletic training, military training, the lack of fathers. Fatherlessness rate is like 50% in this country, 38% for whites, 70% for blacks. So there are a lot of basic things. The whole like fuckboy, like text culture where people don't know how to approach women. Just, do you want to go to Serafini at 7:30 Saturday? Like it's totally lost. It's guys sending these texts like, hey, big head. So there's a lot more ambiguity in the game. You know, drugs and gaming all day and so on probably don't help. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. A big element of this, though, is, like guys will openly tell you, like young male mentees will say, like, this is the Me Too era. Like, I'm not trying to get charged with rape. Like, I'm scared of some of this stuff. And it seems to me that there's a very small cadre of women that are pushing this stuff. Like every time I've asked online and just asked some question, like, as long as it's done in a coherent, aggressive but gentlemanly way, like, do you want men to approach you? Women say, like, yeah, 95% of the time, like, I'm pretty. Why wouldn't I?
See, you probably have sane women following you, and not so much of these women who are, very influenced by, that have just gotten out of college, and that environment has been so pernicious. It started with the Antioch rules, where you have to ask for, can I like lick your what?
Yeah, can I lick your nipple? Like they give examples.
I know. Oh my God. Right. And so, this is where this has come from. But, I would say a lot of it too, there's this denial of evolved sex differences,
Yeah.
And that's such a big thing. Like, men evolved to want attractive women. Women evolved to want men who are able and willing to commit and have the ability to provide. And so whether or not you want a boyfriend or want to be married, that still is built into you. It's built into me as a woman, even though I never wanted anybody to, I always felt like, don't marry me because if you want to leave, I want you to. This is so insulting. You'd have to stay beyond when you wanted to. And so even though I'm like that, I still want that. And a great example, this guy, John Marshall Townsend, my friend, did this research where, or maybe he wrote about it, I can't remember, but where women, who had one night stands, who wanted nothing to do with the guy afterward, who knew that, woke up the next morning thinking, does he want me? Like, will he call? And they wanted nothing to do with him.
Hang up
they
on
had
him.
that. What? Right. So
Yeah.
they wanted him to want them because that's how we are. That's how we evolved. So we have a species again instead of, a bunch of cockroaches running the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you see now, actually, because there's such a large influence of kind of collegiate training on at least upper middle class women, is people that are conflicted by like really normal female perspectives. Like, I mean, if you go on Reddit, it's all these things like, I feel like I'm a sub sexually and I want my boyfriend to take me sometimes. Am I wrong? Am I unusual? And like reading this as a man over 30, it's like, no, that's very, very common. Like,
I don't mean being bad and telling TMI, but like I said to somebody, I'm the one who gets held down.
Yeah, I think that like the majority of women, the majority of women aren't interested in tying up a man and dominating him, except maybe it's a very occasional taste. Like, but it seems to be really bothering people. Like, you'll really see these questions like that. I feel like I'm sexually submissive and I need to like a guy to want him to fuck me was the actual question. And it's like the combination of those two is the most normal thing you could say as a woman of age X. There's even a term for it, like demisexual. Like, I'm very, very sexual with you if you're a man and I like you. Otherwise, no. And it strikes me as extremely odd. It's the female equivalent of the quote unquote breeding kink for guys in porn, which is just vaginal sex where you come. And like the sex itself is presented as, also known as cream pie. That's a real thing. Like, sex is presented as this odd kink. Like, I like hetero sex where the guy's sometimes dominant. What the hell's wrong with you, you pervert? So people are now dealing with this. And an element of this also is like when you mentioned you want financial or at least social stability, that's another question you see a lot. Like, I wouldn't date a poor man. Is there something wrong with me? And you almost want to take these kids and sit them down and say, like, no, it's not unusual to want to have lots of sex with a guy who has money in position X. Like, shut up. But the internet has really, really produced a lot of that. And there are versions for guys as well. So it's interesting.
Oh, no, it's really, really interesting. And actually, powerful women, this is just my unscientific opinion on this, that powerful women tend to want that more, the man who can dominate and I wouldn't say it's not just money, even though that's a sign of being successful. It's that what we seem to long for is a man with potential or who has shown success. We evolved to want that. That's fine. And the same. So, but the women will say, like, how dare you want someone beautiful or you care about a woman's looks? And then it's like, are you dating that very sweet guy with the wonderful personality who's the cashier at 7-Eleven?
Yeah,
no, you're not. And so it's just this, because there's such a dismissing of evolutionary psychology, as this evil, like, oh, we don't like what it says, so we're going to dismiss it. Yeah, guess what? It doesn't really work that way in science. And now we're denying. The most amazing thing is that there's this denial that our two biological sexes, okay, sperm, egg. There isn't like, tortoise and then like, these other kinds of gametes. Gametes is a sex cell, and so there isn't a possibility to have other, like, more than two. And then this denial of this, and it's about, like, this pernicious. You really see this well. I see that from all your tweets and what you write. There's this motivation behind that. What's the motivation? And it seems to be by these trans activists to, have power to, like, okay, women's bathrooms, we get to go in there. We get to have, big swinging dick. Your 6-year-old in the locker room is going to look at a dick, whether she likes it or not. All of this stuff in women's sports. Oh, I love. It's like whiplash. The ones from the 60s and, like, we deserve opportunity in sports, and to now, when it's like, okay, now the males are going to take over your sport. The guy who was like 142nd and something, I just saw this, and then came in 5th in the women's. I forget what sport that was. I mean, that's awful.
Yeah. We'd made all this progress, and now we're trying to give it all back, and that just doesn't go for the gender thing. It goes for all this ethnicity stuff. Like, wait, what do you mean you need your own dorm? I thought we got past all that stuff.
I know. And, and also they'll call you, number one, they'll call you racist. Like, you'll say something that has nothing to do with race. You're racist. I'm like, what? And then the other thing is that, so you can be someone, I believe in treating everybody with respect and dignity. And if you're, you're trans and you want me to call you, her, you look like you're dressing as a woman, even though you were born male, I'll do that to be kind and a decent person, but that doesn't mean I believe you are a woman. I think you're a male who wears ladies' clothing and, has, that's how you're comporting yourself. But, like, the idea, I saw this Ayala, I never say that, Ayala girl, who's in the sort of rationalist community that I'm part of here in LA with the extreme nerds. I am with the tech bros every Wednesday and some women, tech women. And so I love them. But people came after her because she said the same thing. Like, I'll treat you with respect, but I can't, I can't change my belief that you're not a woman. And that was seen as some kind of, like, evil heresy. And so they call people TERFs. Yeah. Me, first of all, I'm not a feminist. I'm a humanist for all, fairness to all people, not just like, if you have a vagina, I'm on your side, and it's so stupid because I'm a person who's been for gay rights and gay marriage and all this stuff. I'm really, not some, hater, but you're made out to be like that if you don't parrot the coercive language and beliefs of these vicious, horrible trans activists. They're different than the trans people. My neighbor's trans. I knew my neighbor as a male name for like 30 years. And then he is, I'm sorry. I do that, but she knows that I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just like, I forget or whatever, and so people like that, if you do make that little error, they don't care. She, in fact, still has the male email address because she's not a psycho. She's like wearing dresses and, Pink Bob. So, that's the stuff that goes on from the non-psychos versus the people who are trying to, bully and attack and have unearned power, over women, basically.
This is that religious aspect of what we were talking about earlier, where you have to stick to the dogma. And, they just, the exchange is always one direction. Like, we'll talk about banned books, but our governor will talk about, they're banning books in this other state. Like, hey, we got big problems here. We got a zombie lake in our Central Valley problem. Gas is super expensive. Let's work on these problems, but we don't. He wants to talk about banned books. All right. But then people are going to take words out of my mouth. I'm not allowed to say words. I can't say the word. I'm just going to say retard. I can't say that word, even if I don't mean it in any way about anybody with a developmental disabled. And you can't even say certain words. But now I have to read other books. I'm not down with the dogma.
I just want to tell you, retard was actually the term. I forget the term before. It was like idiot or moron or something like that. Right, I forget. Right. And then they said, no, we want to use retarded instead. And that's what we said when I was growing up. And then it became, no, you can't say that. And so, it's a little hard to keep up. And you hear older people saying things like colored person. Yeah. And, someone who's young will say some, even though like people of color, I mean, they're not some hater. They just like, grew up in like they're born in 1927.
Yeah, a lot of this to me is just really obvious class signaling. Like that's sort of the point of it. Like I was reading a book recently about medieval dating, which is apparently a thing, go on a horse ride together, and would do to signal to test whether, a paramour was at their class or status level or was just smart enough to figure things out and sleep with them, was say these sort of subtle things like I have my special perfume behind my ears tonight. There were like 15 or 20, and if guys couldn't figure out what they meant, they were either stupid or of lower rank, and they would probably not end up bringing that relationship to a close. And it's the same thing with all of this kind of stuff. Like, actually, I know this as I've taken some political psych classes, in fact, taught some. And like the original label was like moron, idiot, and imbecile for developmentally delayed people.
Right, imbecile too.
Yeah, you imbecile, but it's so that was the insult, the label. And yeah, retarded, you're exactly right. It was like a nicer way to say all of that. It was more complimentary, less harsh. And then that became labeled by people too negative. So the new term is like delayed or something. It's like all these words like moron, retard, and delay just mean like slowed down in the brain because you're talking about people with IQ scores below like 75. So there's no difference. What you're doing is showing that you're reading the new literature. It's like calling Bombay Mumbai. I mean, which I do.
Right. You're right. And it's so interesting too. Now we can say moron, idiot, and imbecile, and no one will say like, "How dare you?" And so, I mean, it's so amazing. And you've also seen, these things where now I have to be careful so I don't have everyone cancel me like on the internet. I just can't afford the time. Like that someone will read, some literature that has the N-word in it, and they will read a passage that has the actual, it'll be like a professor who's black or something. And, and they will be canceled, fired, and all this stuff. And now they're not saying something hateful. They're looking, it's like it's just words. And someone just today said, what did they say? Oh, I said shit ton. And they said, my Jewish mother washed my mouth out with soap. I don't know if I tweeted this, but I thought like, my mother didn't physically abuse us. She would have used reasoning and language. It seems a little school marmy, but it's true. And so like that sort of thing, I think there's such a salivation to have this, it is unearned power over their people, that you've done something by getting someone fired or by, coming after them as part of a mob on Twitter, when like, what have you really done? I'm an activist. I stand up for things. I'm a pain in the ass. We had the city attorney here. I volunteer for a mediation program when I'm not on book hiatus, which I am now. But I do free dispute resolution for LA residents out of City Hall, the city attorney's office. And this creep, Mike Fuhr, decided he'd cancel this program. 30 of us like work for free to help our fellow citizens. Doesn't cost them, no pension. We bring our own lunch. And I thought over my dead fucking body. And so I went after him in all media, like radio shows, op-eds, and he was forced to uncancel the program. So here I am. I do these things. I had a TSA worker sue me for $500,000. My friend Daz has saved my fucking ass. He's recovering from lung cancer. Love the man. Pro bono, which meant it cost him a lot of money to defend me. And so these people who do nothing but sit there anonymously on Twitter and like windbag off, they feel like they've accomplished something and they've done nothing except be a bully and little, twat to somebody who's, expressed an opinion they don't like.
Yeah. There are actually two things there. Like one of my impressions about all this is that it's so totally fake. And that's what annoys me the most. Like, I mean, so for example, with saying nigger, which I guess I can say because I'm black.
You can say, are you black, totally black, or all black?
Yeah, I'm
allowed to say that.
I'm black, Irish, and Dene Indian, if I recall the family history.
I love black Irish. I think that's always so funny. Like, never mind. Go ahead.
No, but I mean, like, actually, just as a funny story about like non-political correctness, I was talking to one of my good buddies is Indian American, and I was talking to his dad. And we were talking about like taking 23andMe tests. And I mentioned that I was black. I was Bantu, British, and Plains Indian. And the Indian guy looked at me and he was like, "You are built for war." You should join the military. It was just really funny, like, because they're all known for conquests and various.
No, that's great. Yeah, like the Sikhs are the warriors.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how realistic that is. But like the thing with all this stuff, though, like when people, I remember once I was in a passionate conversation. This was like 5 years ago. It's probably on like Facebook or something with someone who kept arguing that you should never say nigger or my nigga. None of this. This was a black guy. Even if you're black, it's taboo. And I remember a couple days later, like I actually respected his perspective, but he asked me what I thought of like the new Yo Gotti album or something, because I'm a pretty big hip hop head. And the number one song on it, YG album, actually from out where you guys are. And the number one song on the album, which became the number one hit in the country, was called My Nigga. So it's just like, it's literally like you can still Google it and find like My Nigga, the music video, which has like 50 million views and has some pretty good lines in it. Like the It Wouldn't Be LA Without Mexicans line comes from that song. But there's nobody alive is actually offended listening to YG, like black, white, Mexican, at least about that. The treatment of women or the gunplay or something might irritate someone. But the whole thing of like, you can never say this, it brings back the memories of the plantation house to me and so on, is just all fake. And I mean, and it's not even just my guess, like from dating relationships and so on, like all the radical feminist posturing online are also lying. I would never do that with a man. Like, it's not true. It's the same thing for all the MRA types that are saying, I would never treat a woman like a lady. I would never get on my knees for a girl. It's like the first woman to actually accept your date offer, like you would offer to marry. Like none of these people are real. So that's the thing that's irritating. Like people are propounding a philosophy that really has potentially negative impacts, but almost no one lives by that. Like almost no white liberals that talk constantly about diversity actually are going to move to Harlem. It's just the most pretentious public statement of the non-true. The problem, just as with porn and gangster rap and all this, the problem and the only problem is that like very young people who haven't been trained, who are exposed to this shit, think it's real. Like, why does that never happen to me when someone delivers a pizza? Like that's the issue.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, you brought up a great point. I didn't know what you meant by fake until you started talking, and you reminded me. There's a chapter by Bruce J. Ellis in this psych book, and he talked about, it's a little bit old, but feminist leaders, where they ask these real leaders in feminism, the type of man they want, and they were all like rich, like words like that, and like has a mansion, has a private jet. These were the women who are, like the women's lib, leaders. And so all of this, is this, like you're saying, this posturing, and when really there is affected, driven by the same evolutionary motivations we all are. And then the other thing I was reminded of, if you're like these white liberals, this is this posturing thing, this show thing. If you're actually somebody, in New York, I skated with a group of all black guys. They were so awesome. And so because I was one of them, they called me white out. I love that. Like you joke. I don't want to say my neighbor's name on here, because it's his privacy, but he's a really funny name. The two names, the last name's White. And I said, like, that is like the worst name for a black man. He laughed. And like, I'll tease him. He sent me like a face on like a, what's it called, emoji. I'm obviously not of this century, but I said, if you look that, it was yellow. I said, you look that color, I'm going to take you to the emergency room. And so you have a real life with people where you joke. Well, the other joke that I love, they said, I have walls. White walls is more of a tan than you, and like that kind of thing where you joke around. That's real. Like we're just like all the Martin Luther King thing is like how I was raised. Like judge people by their behavior, and not their skin color. And now this is so racist the way we live. It's racism, like, but you're allowed to hate white people, and it's just gross. It's not acceptable to do that for, like, why is it acceptable now to do that? And it's like this chic, trendy thing. And also Karen, if people say Karen, I mean, I will slap someone someday, even though I'm only hostile, not violent. It's a word for shut up white woman. It's racist. And, and as a person who is, kind of a scold, but like hopefully just when called for it, like if you're abusing my neighbor, you're blasting music at 1 a.m., I'm going to come out with my flashlight and I'm going to scream at you or something, my big, like, and shine it into your car, and you're not going to like it, because guess what? You don't get to do that to us. and I'm not going to be a victim. And so, you know, the people who use it, they don't think about the origins. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. I should give you guys some airtime.
No, I mean, I agree with, I mean, obviously I agree with most things both of you have said tonight. I mean, I'm not like leaving in a rage or anything, but no, first of all, that point that when you actually like people, you trade jokes and insults and you make fun of each other, that's extremely accurate. I mean, like I posted an example online a couple days ago, but I was in the locker room playing basketball at like the local like rec center, men's place, whatever. And one of the guys who was in there was a black guy, and he asked a group of people, "Hey, what's 10 inches long and white?" And everyone was like, "I don't know, what the fuck are you asking? What?" And he was like, "Nothing." And everybody started cracking up because obviously you get it. It's just like a dick joke for the other team. But like it's that sort of stuff is actually totally wholesome. I mean, not to like keep giving these examples, but when I was in high school, I had a good buddy named Marcus Jackson. And we both played like pickup park league basketball in Chicago and Aurora. And very often audiences would refer to me as Sunshine and him as Midnight because he was this really dark dude that was slightly taller than me. And then I would like come out at the same position. So all that stuff like today, that would create some kind of outcry, like all this stuff at like volleyball and basketball games where someone apparently like makes an ape hoot noise or like, you know, accuses a French player of being gay or throws a banana at a black player. I would never endorse that kind of thing, but that is far less serious than the teasing that you would see at any Chicago high school game in the 80s or 90s. Like it's just a ridiculous level of like, we're going to find the ape grunter. We're stopping students at the door. It's like, Jesus Christ.
I know. You know, actually, and when you see, I can tell, I have a good sense on who's psycho and who's not. So I was at Kaiser picking up my medication the other day, and the security guard there, I talked to everyone, like, I mean, everyone. And I came out and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And he was very, very black. He's from Ghana. See, I like, "Where are you from?" I asked that, you're not supposed to say that anymore. But I held my hand up to him, like, "Look, like chocolate and vanilla." Like, you know, you can say stuff to that to people who are not of this sort of like, we're from the academic religion of like, you know, here are all the things you can and can't say. Oh, fuck off, really. You know, and if you, what I've done now, like I'll stand up for people because I can, because I'm so used to doing it that, you know, the idea that you cancel me, like, it's not unexpected for me to say like, what is this crap, you know, and people, you know, I'm not an academic. I don't know, you know, I don't have to worry about that. And so, you know, it's important for those of us who can do that, you know, emotionally. I have the emotional capital, the social capital, you know, I don't have the financial capital, but that also means that you know, it'd be really dumb to sue me. And I'm not going to defame you because I wrote for newspapers. I know the First Amendment stuff, you know, and so, you know, people need to really realize that so many people are curtailed and that we really need to stand up for someone being mobbed, you know, and for, you know, against the anti-free speech, totalitarian, tiny little totalitarian bullshit.
Hey, let's do some final thoughts. This Friday, we're working too hard.
Okay.
Go ahead, Will.
I missed what you said.
We're going to do some final thoughts this Friday, and we're working too hard. So we're going to start slide into the weekend. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, so Amy, thanks for coming on and enjoyed talking to you as I assumed we would. My final thought, I guess, is just a condensation of mostly things the other two participants have said, but it's important not to deny reality. With all of these questions, like, do men and women enjoy sex and money? There's a very obvious answer. And this is also true when it comes to most of the things that you see in the social science fields I work in. And there's not really that much more to say. Like, if people are consciously telling you things that are obviously not real, like there are some women out there with 9-inch penises and there are in fact 3 sexes, the average intelligent layman, which is how we kind of started this conversation, talking about the advice goddess columns, which you should check out. The average intelligent layman is going to be able to use the same skills that make juries possible and journalism possible and interdisciplinary journals possible to say, well, no, that's just bullshit. It's clearly and obviously not true. If a woman is an adult human female, then that's not real. So when you feel that kind of instinct inside yourself, don't suppress it. Like, it's very, very often correct. And it's always a good idea to listen to your first mind.
And so I guess I'll finish. This is like when someone says, "What's your favorite movie?" In my head, it's evacuated of any. Actually, I can answer that blazing saddles. That's always my answer. But, so I'll say something I told somebody on Twitter the other day from my book, and it's something I've learned, and that is your feelings are not the boss of you. And so you can be afraid. It's important to identify your feelings so you know what's holding you back, what your fears are. And so say that you're afraid to approach someone. And so classic Albert Ellis rational emotive behavior therapy is, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, will the grounds, open up and you'll be like a claw will drag you under? No, the person might be rude to you. Well, okay, will that kill you? No, like lightning won't strike you. So, okay, you might be a little bit humiliated. All right. So, and you're afraid to do that. Guess what? Tell your feelings to fuck off. You've got your fear identified. Go fuck off fear and go talk to that person. And maybe you'll be all stumbly and it'll go poorly and everything. Okay, well, here's the way to look at that. Small win. You were brave. You went over and talked to the person, and like, how cool is that? You were better than you would have been yesterday and were yesterday. And then do it again. Okay, maybe it still sucks. Okay, keep doing it. And as you keep doing that, you can see that your fear was stupid. Like nothing bad happens, and you get better and better. And the way to actually do this is just fake it till you make it. No, this is where science comes in. Fake it till you make it. Like for me to do that, I have to not dig my nails, sit up straight, remember to talk from my diaphragm, all this stuff. And we have this, it's like a whiteboard is our working memory, and it can hold like a few items. And basically, you trying to remember all this, it just goes to shit. So what I say instead is to impersonate your way to the new you. So when you're doing this the first few times, think of someone who's very confident. I used to use my boss, Kathy DeToro. She could tell you anything, like your cat is dead and like it'll be okay. And you believe her. And so you can hear me talking differently. And by the way, I'm a terrible actress. But what you do is you put on their whole persona, and then you're not you. So if you get rejected, there's this little secret of you're just you pretending to be them. So a little airbag. But it helps you have the affect of somebody confident. And as you do that more and more, you get bored with being them. You just do it as you. And so this is the evolution. And so part of the problem, well, I would guess that you guys would both agree with this. People want things to be instant. Well, they're not instant. You have to work a lot and go through a lot of that sucks. Somebody was mean, it's horrible. I feel bad, but more and more and more, and keep doing it. You have to, habits are made by repetition. Don't let yourself out of it. Keep doing it. And that's the way you can actually change. That's the message of my book on ckology, that your emotions, you affect your emotions with your actions, and your actions affect your emotions. Bidirectional. So repeatedly act like a confident person, and that's how you transform. You'll be like 20%. I'm still 20% loser, where I go, oh, I have nothing to say. No one wants to hear me. I should leave. And then the other part of me goes asshole. I like to say that because then I laugh. But asshole, you worked on this. Don't be an idiot. Shut up. Sit down. And usually when that happens, I was at a dinner and this happened where there's silence, and I thought they're all thinking about it. You don't know anything. Nobody had anything to say. They're all smart people, and somebody talked. And so that's the reality. Just accept that we all as humans kind of suck and are, fuck ups, and, it's just a human condition. It connects the other people to be kind of well, I'm humiliated, I'm afraid. And then just act your way out of it.
I love it. All right, stand by with you two, and I'll say goodbye to you in a second here.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.